Afghanistan remains our top focus at this hour. Now, according to an Afghanistan government's negotiator, the Taliban has proposed a ceasefire, and this is in return for the release of insurgent prisoners. The statement comes from Nader Naderi, who is the government negotiator currently involved in the peace talks between Afghanistan and the Taliban. He said that the Taliban has proposed a 3-month ceasefire in return for the release of about 7,000 insurgent prisoners held in Afghanistan's jails. Naderi has called this a big demand, adding that the insurgents also want the names of Taliban's leaders to be removed from a United Nations blacklist. The demands from the Taliban come amid rapid advances as they claim to control at least 85% of the districts across the nation. It even controls or contests all the border crossing points along Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, China, and now even Pakistan. The truce proposal came as Pakistan guards used tear gas to disperse hundreds of people who tried to breach a border crossing into Afghanistan. The frontier was closed by Pakistan after the Taliban seized the Afghan side in Spin-Boldak district. Now, according to a security official at the southwest Chaman border, around 1,500 people had gathered to cross the border, and then a mob of about 400 people tried to cross the gate forcefully. A senior government official said that the situation is now under control. Spin-Boldak is the Taliban's biggest strategic gain so far. At least 900 trucks cross this frontier every day, and this district provides the Taliban a direct access to the Pakistani province of Balochistan. And this province is very important as this is where the Taliban has its reserve fighters, also its top leadership. There is a highway that connects Spin-Boldak to the Karachi port, and it's significant because it helps the Taliban with its heroin trade. While Afghanistan's Interior Ministry has denied that the insurgents had taken the area, a Taliban flag could be seen at the close Pakistan-Afghanistan border in Chaman. And Spin-Boldak is the border crossing on the main highway between Kandahar and Quetta, Pakistan, and continuing onwards to Karachi. Now, according to the Tajikistan border guards, 347 refugees from Afghanistan had crossed into the Central Asian country over 2 days. And most of these refugees are girls who fled from the Taliban to save their lives. 2 babies died during the border crossing. A senior Afghan government delegation is expected to meet the Taliban in Doha to jumpstart the long-stalled peace talks between the two sides. For more on the recent developments in the country, joining us live from Colombo is the Afghan Envoy to Sri Lanka, Ashraf Haidari. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Haidari. Now, this is, of course, a big development. A negotiator saying that the Taliban had offered a 3-month ceasefire in exchange of 7,000 insurgent prisoners. What are your views? Can the Taliban be trusted at this point with any proposal, and will the Afghan government give in to these demands?
Of course, the Taliban will not be trusted because, as everyone knows, the Taliban had initially demanded and we agreed to releasing 6,000 Taliban prisoners, which included some of the most notorious terrorists and drug traffickers. And part is a concession so that the Taliban would do their part under the agreement which they signed with the United States in February 2020. But unfortunately, on each of the commitments that they made, which include to reduce violence, cease the violence, and to engage in serious peace talks, as well as to prevent the prisoners from, going back to the battlefield, as well as cutting ties with Al-Qaeda. Of course, contrary to this, they've actually escalated violence since then, especially over the past 3 months, and running over some of the districts which you mentioned, where they have not only summarily executed civilians, but also some of our surrendered soldiers, and blatant violation of international humanitarian law and human rights law. Moreover, they have destroyed 260 public institutions, displaced 4,000 public servants, leaving about 50,000 public servants in limbo with a job and fearing for their lives. And all of this has affected 13 million Afghans and displacing another 270,000. So these are the serious war crimes they have committed. And of course, we would not trust, we would not definitely consider their demand unless they completely cease violence, pull out, and of course engage in the results-driven peace talks where we make tangible progress before any demand is considered.
Right. Now, the Taliban also claims to have claimed about 85% of Afghanistan, and now we're getting reports that Pakistan security forces had to use tear gas to disperse hundreds of people trying to breach a border crossing into Afghanistan. So how worried do neighbors have to be at this point about Taliban's violence?
Well, we reject that 85%. That's something that some Western or maybe Washington, D.C. think tank has come out. The Taliban have just temporarily run over some districts where they, of course, not able to hold, let alone build or govern. As I just pointed out, they have destroyed and looted everything in their pathway, and as well as persecuting, torturing, killing people. And our forces have already been recapturing those areas lost. Yes, true, some border towns have been lost. Again, there our forces have been deployed and redeployed as we're fast adapting to a new combat environment without the enablers that we used to have from the United States. Right. And we're going to capture those with the also uprising of the Afghan people across the country in support of our forces. So what's happening on the other side of the Doran line is we're concerned, and that's where we see openly that people are allowed to support the Taliban, and you also see the foot soldiers of the Taliban in Peshawar and Quetta waiting to receive the dead and wounded bodies of their fighters, which include, of course, Pakistani fighters as well as Al-Qaeda, ATIM, and from a dozen other terrorist networks in the region.
Right. Ambassador, my final question for you. Now, the group is also demanding that the Taliban leaders be removed from the UN blacklist. Now, these are some big demands. What lies ahead for the Afghan peace talks in the face of these negotiations?
Well, we are just waiting for tangible results, as I said. As we speak, our negotiating team is in Doha, and of course, a high-powered delegation is leaving for Doha, and it all depends on those talks and the tangible actions that the Taliban should take on the ground in order to meet our basic demands for making the necessary progress toward a sustainable political settlement. Until and unless that happens, and we see that happening on the ground by the Taliban, and as well as steps and actions taken by the regional state sponsor to make that happen, of course, they would remain blacklisted, and those that have been temporarily released for negotiations that could also be blacklisted again in accordance with the provisions of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2513, which is here in front of me, as well as the provisions of the U.S. Taliban Doha Agreement. So we do expect all sides to comply with those two documents, and as well as a number of regional and international conferences where everyone in the region, the stakeholders, states, in this case, one of the states, our neighbor Pakistan, that has been continuing to support the Taliban on the ground in Afghanistan.
Right. Ambassador Haidari, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us on WION at this hour. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.